All right, welcome back. We are on live WWCR 13.845 megahertz and on the WWCR stream transmitter 3. I got Frankie.
Hey.
All right.
Hey, good morning.
I got Trish here. So here we are once again, 505-908-9189, or Skype in at Zeph if you want to chime in, if you have anything to say about the amazing, disgusting, spectacular, falling, smacked out world right now. Here's your chance. Vent away. It's the voice of God. And if you hear that voice in your skull, it could be that you are getting a transmission, a voice of God transmission, and it may not be. And this is a big mind control hour here, so we're going to be talking about voice to skull, voice of God, and things like Jared Lee Loughner and other assassins being beamed and programmed by satellites to then carry out their nefarious deeds, that it's all electronic and psychotronic. So what do you think about that?
Weird.
I think it's more likely that there's some sort of supernatural whammy than a satellite. But
well, aren't the satellites electronic witchcraft anyway? I mean, isn't it, it's all kind of blending to be the same thing? An expression of the human will?
For some reason, I'm skeptical about the whole satellite thing, but why not? It's possible.
The guy that's going to be on next hour, Dr.Robert Duncan, he's like, consultant. He was a consultant in all this stuff. He was, Harvard graduate and Dartmouth graduate, one of these, probably the most expensive education anyone could ever get, a PhD from Harvard. In what? In electronics, in psychotronics, in... he was working on some medical devices on how you could use electronics to do medical stuff in the field, like in a war zone, to where you could be, a doctor could be remotely dealing with patients through neural to computer pathways to communicate certain things to get a quick cure. Wow. So, this guy's been, this guy's on the cutting edge of everything. And he says that it's absolutely positively true that they have technology that can program a person to kill.
Jeez.
That's
I overheard some
bummed me out today. It's bummed me out. I hope it's false. And how can you prove it? But anyway, so you get a guy like this on,
and he was saying that anger is one of the ones that
right. They can trigger anger, and how many times have we felt
outrageous anger? I'm
beginning to think that a lot of this stuff, a lot of this oppression and so forth, what I call the lizard index, is actually, mass beaming of like bad vibes. All right, hey, Brother John, calling from the Salton Sea.
Good morning, Zeph, Trish, and Frankie. How you guys doing this fine day?
John,
pretty darn good. How about you, John?
He's become. We can't do the show without you now, John.
Thank you. Hey, you're just mentioning about psychotronic and Word of God broadcast and stuff like that.
Yes.
The Lord spoke to me one time, and I was a little concerned about it.
Are
when
you
I looked
sure?
up in the scriptures.
Yeah.
And here is how you can tell if it really is the Lord or if it's psychotronic.
Okay.
The scriptures say, "You shall hear a word behind you saying, 'This is the way, walk in it.'" And when Jesus spoke to me one time, I just had this really feeling of being close to God in His presence. I could feel the holiness around me. I could feel incredible joy. And I heard a man's voice gently behind me, whispering in my ear. I had made some prayer requests, and the words were, "It is done." And it's kind of like, who said that?
Now,
behind me, and there was no one there.
What?
I'm just saying that John has just let out the secret for these satellite programming guys.
That's it, right then and there.
It is done.
If you hear a voice in your head, in your skull, in your thoughts, it is definitely not God. You will feel the presence of the Lord as He comes close to you, walking behind you, whispering in your ear.
It is done.
It is done.
You are to go and throw yourself off a cliff because it's the will of God. Okay, well, so you get the point.
Yeah, I had hey, one time I went, and it's a long story how I ended up there, but I was being quote-unquote examined by a psychiatrist for a work injury and stuff like that. But he asked me, have you ever heard voices? And I mentioned that, and he goes, oh, you were drunk at the time. And because he had just explained to me that in psychiatry, God cannot be felt, weighed, smelt, measured, or touched, therefore God does not exist. And have you ever heard voices? And I told him that, and he goes, you were drunk, you were on drugs? I said, no, I was at a prayer meeting. And, how long ago did this happen? And I said, about 20 years ago. And he goes, there's no problem. But he got a little concerned. he got a little concerned, and he said, like, a lot of people hear God, and, like, if God told you to take off your clothes, walk down the street, and murder somebody, what would you do? And I go, well, first thing was, God hates sin. God hates sin so much that he brought his son to die for our sin. And the whole thing is to take off your clothes and go out and murder somebody, is a sin. Now, why would God ask you to do something that he hates?
John, it makes sense, but there are some people that aren't that smart to figure that out, and
That's why I'm mentioning it on the radio. Why would God ask you to do the very thing he hates most?
Well, usually, a lot of people will say, this is God's will. Then, for me, it's like checking and rechecking. It's like a constant process. But for me, anything leading from God's always been this very small, undramatic, something you have to tune into. Not really, theatrical. Like a voice from above. It's not like that.
No.
So.
No, it's that still small voice. God is a gentleman. Actually, let's just call it not God the Father, but Jesus. He's a gentleman, and he is very gentle, loving kindness to his people. And he corrects you very gently, and then if you're a little stiff-necked, then you get a little heavier correction. But God would never, ever ask you to do something that he hates. And once you know the commandments of God, once you have that personal relationship with Jesus, once your thoughts have changed because he's part of your mind, you're part of his mind, you know automatically what's of God and what is not of God.
Yeah. Well, true, but okay, you have weaker people in our society who, especially like this Jared Lee Loughner guy, I mean, obviously he was not wanting to tune into God. He was tuning into the occult. He was doing rituals. And he was hearing voices, obviously, and being led by a certain spirit, by a certain thing, or by certain satellite transmissions. But something made him go off the edge that day to where he, or for a 3 or 4 day period where he went particularly further than he had gone before, because he had never, really been violent with anyone. He hadn't murdered anyone. He hadn't really been a criminal. He got caught with some pot once. I mean, this does not sound like a guy who's just amped up and, into kind of like this roid rage sort of thing. And, people that are like that kind of violent, usually they have a pretty long rap sheet, of getting in scrapes since they're, in high school. This guy didn't have anything like that. He was weird. People were afraid of him because he would stare at them. He would do socially inappropriate things in public. But something sent him over the edge one day or in a period of a week where he actually had to go, get gun, get ammo, or he had the gun and ammo, but he was then led to go stock up on weapons, get an extra long clip, which would have to be through mail order because those are illegal, as can be.
Actually, no, they're legal in Arizona.
Oh, a 30-round clip is legal in Arizona?
Yeah, they had that.
Okay, so he'd have to have
clip, it expired, but it has never expired in California. So the best you can do is get a 10-round magazine for anything.
Okay, you get a 10-round magazine, but now if it's legal, you can get a 30 or 40-round magazine that makes the handle of the gun very long, but it's still a handgun. So he intended and had premeditation that he intended to do a lot of shooting on that day. And I believe he intended to go to this conference that day and blow them all away. So he was not the same person that he was, say, a week earlier, but he was already tagged and known by the government as weak psychologically. Mm-hmm. Someone who was on
And how did he know that she was going to have that meeting there, and how did he know the judge was going to be there?
Well, apparently he had been kind of obsessed with her for quite a number of years, since I think 2007 or something, when she didn't answer a question that he had asked appropriately.
But he had not gone to violence,
mind.
and he wasn't really stalking her, actively.
But he had other violent altercations with others.
Right, semi-violent, not really, so much that he would be in jail. See what I mean? He was not at that level of intensity as he was that last week leading up to the death of all those people in Gabby Giffords. He was not at that level.
And then the Salvia situation, too.
Salvia...
And again, Zeph, don't forget...
people act like Salvia is the end of the world. Salvia just is like a 5-minute trip, and that's it.
Well, as for not being a violent person, if he was really involved in black magic and Satanism and stuff, then he is going to be going and casting spells and, quote-unquote, doing evil in the spiritual realm to people, which is damn violent right there.
Okay, all right.
Very demonic.
Throwing the death whammy, I've had a few thrown at me, and it sure doesn't feel very good, but, we're living in a world where people have the power to throw stuff like that on each other, and it's disgusting.
Actually, I had some people throw one on me one time, and I returned the compliment. But before I did, I wanted to make sure it was scriptural. And just basically, years ago, the Lord led me to this young gal. She was about 15, 14. Her parents were living nearby where I was, and she was being enticed into Satanism. And I don't know how it happened. We just talked about it, and she realized that she was in trouble. And she realized that Satan had a use for her, but when he didn't have a use for her anymore, he would take her out. And she goes, "What can I do?"
Duh.
I go, "Well, there's really nothing you can do, but if you agree to it, I can pray a hedge of protection around you." And she said, "Okay," and she agreed to it. I prayed a hedge of protection around her. I seen her the next day, and she just said, "Wow, it was incredible. Nobody beat me up in school. Nobody cussed me. In fact, they wanted me to lead the satanic chant." But I knew what was going on, and I said, "Oh, that's really interesting."
What school does she?
Last night.
What school does she go to?
What?
What school does she go to? That's a weird.
I have
school.
no idea. This is years ago.
A satanic school.
Well, I mean, just hanging around with the local Satanist out here.
It's like
anyway,
Harry Potter.
The middle of the night, I woke up, and little punches were flying all over me. A few objects were flying across the room at me. The mattress was bouncing up and down. I woke up out of a sound sleep. I took care of the problem immediately and bound it all. And I thought, okay, tit for tat, return the compliment. But I wasn't too sure. So I went to a friend of mine who... was an occultic crimes instructor, a Christian, a pastor, and I asked them, they did this to me. I have every right to return that to them. Should I? And he said, absolutely not. And I said, okay, why? He said, when did Jesus ever return evil for evil? And I said,
correct.
He never did.
You need to... That's correct.
So anyway, the whole thing was, the bottom line was, I owed him one. So I went and prayed for God to send his Holy Spirit and his angels to their next coven meeting. And never had a problem because, in the name of Jesus, I can cast out Satan. But in the name of Satan, can they cast out Jesus?
Nope.
They had a problem.
They had a problem.
That was spiritual warfare.
Yeah, of course.
That whole escalation thing where people return things multiplied by a certain factor.
Yeah.
I return that Lammy 7-fold or 100-fold or 1,000,000-fold, and it's almost like the escalation of...
Well, you can also return it... You can return it null and void. I mean, just return it broken.
Just so they know that it's broken.
But anyway, yeah, there is, there's a fine line. That's a constant debate. The Bible does talk about returning to sender sevenfold. It also talks about, usually when you return something, if you're returning demons, you're returning them back from where they came. You're not really returning evil. You're returning demons. You're casting them out and returning them.
Return to sender.
Hey, John, I'm going to let you go. See if somebody else wants to call in. All right.
Talk to you then.
All right, John,
God bless.
thank you so much. From the Salton Sea, Brother John.
Or you put them in the pigs, right?
In the pig sea, you take, some people may call that evil, but they had to go somewhere. And
put them somewhere.
And so usually you're going to send them back. So if a witch sends you demons, to make you do bad things, and you realize, oh, these are not my thoughts. This is some spirits trying to trigger me into doing something self-destructive. It's not me. I'm just going to send that back to sender, you know, and I'm sending those. In other words, what am I sending? I'm sending those agents of darkness, those demonic forces, those spirits back from whence they came. I think that's the real spirit of it, rather than
bound. Because,
you know, a lot of times you don't even know who's sending what, you know, unless you're really, you know, using psychic powers to then discern that. But that's a real waste of time. Does it matter who it comes from? Not really. And if you don't know who it's coming from, you don't have a lot of personal animus toward that person. You're just sending it back. Here's, you know, talking about stalking. There's also criminal stalking and organized stalking, like that happens to mainly to women. And I think you women out there would be interested in hearing these signs. Frankie, let's go through these and let's see what Trish has to say about them. Number one sign is lurking around your workplace or your neighborhood. Are you constantly bumping into the same guy after work or at the grocery store? Does he conveniently park next to you in the garage or near you on the street? Running into him every night at the gym does not make him a stalker. However, seeing him afterwards in the mall or parked in your neighborhood when you get home may be cause for concern. Likewise, an occasional meeting could be serendipity, but repeating meetings could signal stalking. Okay, that's the first sign. I'm going to go into part 2 here of how do you know you're being stalked. This is just basic stalking via the FBI statistics for women now. Okay, for women. Okay, number 2, being watched. Different than the lurker. What we just described in the first sign was the lurker. The second sign is being watched. Different than the lurker, the watcher will follow you from a distance, gathering personal information about you and those closest to you.
And photographs, etc.
They may photograph you, ask your friends about you, or collect information from other sources such as public records or online research firms. Some will even hire a private detective to follow you so that they can learn every detail about your private life. If you get the feeling you're being watched or persistently recognize the same person in a crowd, you may be under the surveillance of a stalker. Okay, and notice how this parallels gang stalking and, you know, and also stalking via satellite and high tech stalking, psychotronic stalking. Okay, so that's number 2, being watched. Okay, so we go to the next one. Repeated phone calls is number 3.
Repeated phone calls and no one on the other line?
This does not mean a daily check-in with somebody you've been seeing regularly. This means multiple calls every day from someone you only know casually. It can also mean hang-ups or silent messages left on your machine. Try telling the person to stop it, and if the call persists, call the police. Okay, call the police. You're not, you know, that is something the police can handle, and they're not going to...
Because there would be an actual physical phone record, correct?
Yeah, but it gets darker. Now, this is just, you know, like the dark side of the human being, you know. Okay, it gets darker. Inappropriate gifts. Some stalkers start out by sending flowers or candy to indicate a romantic interest. When their affections are not returned, they escalate the situation by sending inappropriate and often pornographic gifts. A typical tactic is to send the gifts to your office so that you are embarrassed in front of your peers and are forced to acknowledge them, even if only by stating that you have no idea who sent them. Stalkers will often follow up their gift by calling you to see if you received it. If you have a company receptionist, see if that person can screen deliveries for you. The receptionist may also be able to describe the person who dropped off the package in case it was delivered personally. That's number 4. Number 5, finding yourself in the position of needing to be rescued. While anyone can experience a flat tire or mechanical breakdown on the highway, many stalkers enjoy the feeling of playing the hero. It will create a situation that requires that you be rescued. These can include a flat tire with no obvious sign of tire damage or running out of gas unexpectedly. The stalker will then suddenly appear and gallantly change your tire or have a spare gas can that solves your problem. As tempting as their assistance may be, politely decline and tell the person that you have notified a tow company and they will be arriving shortly. Now that is scary stuff, right? Let's go to the next one.
Oh, man.
Okay, some hero complex stalkers are even more subtle in their approach. They will follow you on a rainy day and offer you the use of their umbrella, or through sleight of hand borrow your keys and then miraculously present them to you, stating that you must have drop them while in line at the cashier. While most of these instances are, in fact, just gentlemanly behavior, it is better to be cautious with anyone that you don't know personally. A true gentleman will understand your concern and politely excuse himself. One that isn't will, insist on a reward for that kind of, for something he set up already. So the sixth sign is manipulation. Now, stalkers are looking, the first few signs we had was lurking, okay? Hero complex. That is someone that will flatten your tire and then mysteriously show up and change the tire for you, or you'll suddenly run out of gas and then he'll be there with a gas can, that sort of thing. Frivolous lawsuits, those were a few. But now, and so we just finished the hero complex and we're going into manipulation now. Number 6 here is manipulation. Stalkers are looking for interaction with their victims and will often manipulate women into having contact by filing frivolous lawsuits. Here we are on that. These legal measures can range from the ridiculous to the ruthless. The point is that in defending yourself, you are forced to deal with the stalker. Other forms of manipulation include threats against themselves, requiring the victim to intervene. They may threaten suicide or hurting another person if you do not return their affections. If you find yourself being manipulated into behavior that you otherwise would not condone, you are likely being stalked and should report the person to the police immediately. Okay, immediately.
So that last one there is a classic on dealing with any alcoholic, right? Because they'll call up and say, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm all drunk, and I'm going to kill myself. I mean, who has not gotten that call from an alcoholic friend or family member?
Right. I mean, see, there's a certain amount that's not really stalking, but just, it's, again, this is mainly geared toward women who have been stalked in the traditional way. But I'm also saying notice how close it is to gang stalking, similar techniques. Okay, number 7, internet stalking. Here's one that you're really going to want to pay attention to.
You got a PhD in that one, bro.
Okay. You mean being a victim?
Yeah. Oh, yes, of course, yes. On the receiving end, of course.
Yeah, well, I can't wait to talk to the guests next hour because I have some things to tell them. This Dr.Robert Duncan, by the way, he interviewed 600 mind control victims, or people that said they were victims of mind control.
Wow.
He found only a small percentage was really mind controlled, but that percentage was very disturbing that he found. Very similar to UFO abductions in terms of percentages. Anyways, internet stalking. Modern stalkers send numerous emails to the victim each day. They will bombard their victim with instant messages, invitations to chat rooms, or links to suggestive websites. I guess suggestive means sexual or pornographic. Is that what it means? Mm-hmm. Internet stalking is often an extension of physical stalking, although not always. And in some cases, the stalker may not even know the true identity of the victim, having seen the victim's profile in an online forum. And now this was written several years ago, so today it would be in a social network like Facebook. Okay? Okay, I'm not meaning to scare you from Facebook. I mean, the thing they want you to do, the stalker, is to leave and go away. They're trying to intimidate you off the air, to go hide. Okay, this does not make internet stalking, also called cyber stalking, acceptable. In fact, internet stalking can be even more dangerous than the physical stalking because it limits the victim's access to online information, intimidates the victim into changing their online habits, and can open the victim's personal computer and information it contains to the stalker's hacking. The good news is that most law enforcement agencies have cybercrime units, and often internet stalking is treated with more seriousness than the reports of physical stalking. If you find yourself being harassed online, report the situation both to your internet provider and local law enforcement. Okay, so they will not think you're crazy if you report that. Okay, 8. Here we go. Now here's one I'm kind of familiar with, but this is mainly geared to women here. Defamation or character insults.
I think we're all familiar with that one.
Okay. Stalkers often try to isolate their victims from family and friends. They release character-damaging information, regardless of whether it's true or not, in hopes of ostracizing the victim from those closest to her. When hurtful or damaging information is made public, your first reaction may be to retreat or withdraw from the public eye. This is exactly what the stalker wants. Instead, fight character defamation and public insults vehemently. If there is truth to the information, accept responsibility quickly and tell your side of the story. The important thing is to maintain your presence within your normal circles and do not isolate yourself from support systems that could help you in the event your stalker moves even closer. Okay. So that's, and as far as you people like doing blogs and broadcasting, when people get really mad at you and they start, creating whole websites and how awful and evil you are and things like that, which I've experienced, the only thing I could do, folks, is to keep going.
Walk on.
And every once in a while, just slime these liars because they're stalkers. You know who they are. Even
backhand them.
Yeah, like people like Lisa Ruby. She would be considered to me a stalker. Okay?
Yeah.
And she gets people that are in the public eye that she doesn't like, and then she slimes them by lying about them. That's not a Christian woman. All right? And then she hides behind all this scripture
Sliming
quoting.
people like,
right? People like
Dr.
Sherry
Stan
Shriner is a also one of these people that defames people and puts up stuff on her internet, and even at one point put up pictures, like solarized pictures of me and others to prove we were reptiles, and had a big laugh at that. This is a person that's not serious. She's not a Christian. She's not a believer in anything except her own, boosting her own status and stalking anyone she doesn't like. Who's she working for? And there are numerous others. I mean, obviously, the people that are probably pretty real, you may get in a fight with them, but you won't see them putting up damning information or character assassinations, and the list goes on and on and on, okay? That's just, now, what do they do to women? Same thing, only it's a little bit different. They might put up, look what they did to Sarah Palin. They put up pornographic pictures, they're like using Photoshop to put her head on a nude model. Things like that.
Yeah, Sarah Palin gets an inordinate amount of harassment.
Okay, but I have to defend myself, and I'm doing it. At least I'm clearing the record once again for the umpteenth millionth time. I've done that now. Randy Moggins went out lying about me over and over, and making whole things up that had no basis in truth whatsoever for the purpose of character assassination. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, he had his minions going around to listeners, trying to woo them over to listen to him and not to the evil Zeph. And, these are some famous examples. If I were you, knowing this, I would steer far clear of them. No, I'm not going to go on I'm not going to return the same thing they did to me. I'm just going to point out, that I've been a victim of these people. And
not that creative either.
There's no truth to what they say. They'll take facts and twist them to mean something that has nothing to do with reality. They're just violent people, okay? They're just angry people, and they're stalkers on the same time. But now I'm getting away from that. This is directed toward women. Not number 9, violence. The use of threats or violence to frighten their victims is a common strategy for many stalkers. Your car may be vandalized or your home burglarized, okay?
Often that's been reported.
While these crimes happen all too often in today's environment, the non-stalking criminal will not contact you afterwards. If you receive threats or direct contact from someone who claims to have been responsible for a recent crime, report it immediately to the police. Well, that goes without saying. The information you provide may help them piece together the physical evidence from the crime and solve your stalking case at the same time. Well, in the kind of stalking we had, which was gang stalking, we couldn't do that, could we, Trish?
One of the people in the chat said a lot of the stuff a lot of these points are things that they tried to do to the Quaids, Randy Quaid. And
Right, exactly. So I'm just saying it's uncanny how it goes. The gang stalkers use the same techniques as the women who've been stalked for years. Particularly if any of you are cursed with the being beautiful women, that could be a blessing and a curse, right? Okay, so you attract this kind of stuff if you're a pretty woman. So anyway, perhaps a lot of women, who are pretty will almost, who are kind of not handling it too well, will dress themselves down and even hurt themselves to not be attractive, to protect themselves from this kind of thing. That becomes a malady. In other words, the stalker is one.
So do you think you could measure the oppression level of an area by, unless you're in Amish territory, by how modestly the women are dressing?
Here's the last point. Here's the last point, Frankie. Cumulative unwanted contact of any kind. In other words, perhaps no particular incident stands out in your mind as being dangerous, but when you look at the entire picture, what you see alarms you. Do you experience repeated unwanted contact from the same person? If it is someone you know, tell him he is making you uncomfortable. If the situation continues, report him to the police. If it's someone you do not know, go directly to the police. I mean, in all these, it's go to the police. Stalking is often subtle and yet pervasive. In fact, the stalker is counting on you to feeling as if his actions are ordinary demonstrations of affection. If you find yourself experiencing any kind of these situations on a consistent basis, is, you may be the victim of stalking, and your quick reporting to the police is almost the most effective tool that you can use, especially in cyber stalking. So finally, ladies, here is what it says. Are you attracted to the kind of guy that seems to be Mr. Right, then turns out to be all wrong? The problem has less to do with who you are than the messages you are sending. So there's like a quiz to find out. Here is the quiz. Okay, what type of man do you attract? This has gotten all of one star. It's gotten slammed. Now, take this quiz. How do you see yourself? A, worthless. B, I've been better. C, I feel good about myself. Or D, perfect.
Well, also, unfortunately, abuse that happens to a child, whether it be a man or a woman, in their younger days, can result in various, patterns that are self-destructive for that person until they get healing, that would, make you fall into one of those categories.
Well, it
that
said
might not be beneficial, and I could say that, from personal experience.
Okay. Well, anyway, I guess this is for you single women. It's you're attracting. I would like to keep this page on just to, to basically, read some of this later. I've also got some other there's these other mind control sites that I've been on. I've got several links now on the website.
It's got to go both ways, too, because I knew this woman who she met her husband. Well, I guess I forget if they were going to get a divorce or where they were at that point, but they originally met by her intentionally running into him in the apartment complex. She intentionally ran into his car with her car to meet him, okay? So, it's impossible that this thing goes on at all,
There's one site here called mindjustice.org.
Well, I'm really looking forward to your talk coming up with Dr. Duncan and Dr. Hall. That should be very interesting.
I've got a PDF there. I've got microwave harassment and mind control experimentation, Federation Against Mind Control Europe, Americans Thought Control, Mind Control, Disinformation, and Other Naughty Things by Moss David Posner, mindjustice.org, raven1.net. And then
I really can't imagine going to the cops and having them help at all, though.
No.
Can you?
No. And then many times we couldn't go because you're talking about something much different than just a stalker that's stalking a pretty woman or whatever.
Yeah.
But we also have another site called Freedom from Covert Harassment and Surveillance. That's freedomfchs.com. And that one is pretty good. There was one that I just had in Australia, and that was really excellent. I've got it. Okay, I've got it. You know what it is? It's called surveillanceissues.com. Surveillanceissues.com. And this is WWCR and broadcasting on 13.845 megahertz to the world. And, of course, the worldwide international Zeph Daniel version podcast, which is found on ZephDaniel.com, ZephNet.com, ZephReport.com, ZedJaw.com, and any kind of Zeph thing will get you there. And it usually goes to ZephDaniel.podbean.com, which is kind of a catch-all site for blog, video, and especially podcast audios. And usually when we talk about these kinds of topics, we get letters from people that say, yes, it's happened to me. Yes, it's happening to me. Yes, I'm dealing with a stalker right now. Is it organized, or is it some guy, or is it a group of them? In my case, it's a group of them, or, disgruntled people on the internet stalk. When they start using defaming is a part of cyber stalking, defamation, and that sort of thing. Okay, then that obviously, goes to stalking. And, is it just because of, in my case, radio competition that's causing people to defame, like politics? Well, perhaps it is, but the thing you have to do is not go away. Don't leave what you're doing. Let's say you're on Facebook and then someone takes issue with you and they start trying to defame you around on Facebook. You got to stand your ground. You can't just go quit. And then report it to the provider, report it to Facebook, and report it to the police, to the cyber stalking unit of your local police if it persists. And that will send a very strong message. Again, I said it the other day. It's like the playground. You know, if you let the bully win, and at time when I began on the air, I was fairly traumatized as a human being from actual gang stalking. So I didn't know who to trust, and so I got really frightened when things would happen, rather than just seeing it as a bully that needed to be punched out. But the thing is when you're on the playground, when we're kids, okay, if the bully knows, or the group of bullies know, that they can kick you around and you're not going to do anything, you're not going to stand up for yourself, then you're going to keep getting kicked around until you get some help. And that's a parent teaching you how to box, right? Remember?
There's got to be some kind of psychic vampire thing going on with bullies like that, right? I mean, because the idea is that you don't go around the bullies because you're afraid of being oppressed, right?
Yeah, but what we've learned now on the internet is that you can't back down from them when they are they working for a group? Is it spiritual? Are they Satanist? Are there demons running?
There is a demonic element. I really completely think
fine.
So.
I think it's got the original concept of the demonic hive mind.
Mm-hmm.
Having this agenda.
Okay, but at the same time, all right, this is what Dr. John Hall is doing. He was, if his book is called A New Breed. And it's become kind of a classic. When he first published it and we interviewed him, he had a lot of, I'd say, stalkers that were giving him 1 star on Amazon. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
he's starting to get a lot of good comments.
Right. Now he has a lot of 5 stars because he's hung in there. But, I mean, they start right off trying to ruin him. Right out of the box, they tried to ruin this guy. But he hung in there, and he was just his trade is that he's an anesthesiologist working in San Antonio, Texas, and he makes that's all in the book here. And then he details evidence about how he's being stalked there, and he's doing the thing that he recommends others do. He's keeping a chronicle of the information. That's what you can keep a chronicle on Facebook. If you have no blog and you're on Facebook and you're being harassed, use your updating of your because it never goes away. So you can use your...
Yeah, I was going to say, anything you put there is never going to go away, ever.
It makes a good record for court. You just keep putting up information. So-and-so is stalking me. They're on Facebook. They're friends with so-and-so. This is what they did today. And put it there. Not sweeping it under the rug, because I found, and listen, folks, I know that the easy thing to do is to sweep it under the rug. Not easy, but I mean, your instincts tell you to just go hide and it'll go away and then come back. Well, I've tried that, to go hide and they'll blow it over and it blows over and then come back. They don't respect you. They'll start in again. That's just... They're not going to respect you until you punch the bully in the nose. And that's just the same thing in prison. In prison, it's more heavy duty. I mean, you see the thing on TV, you got to almost kill somebody in order to not be made a punk. Well, it's the same nasty playground in, maybe a lot lesser intense, but it's basically the same nasty playground on the internet. And you can choose not to be there, but then that's not the end of stalking. If you're one of these people that shrinks away from it, they'll get you at work. They're going to get you at.
I think you kind of have to
at the gym. They're going to get you at the grocery store. They're going to get They're going to get you until you stand up for yourself.
And you have to wear the full armor of God, and you really have to just say no. I'm not putting up with this.
Some people are really being brave. They're actually going and filming. I didn't get that video. I should have put that video on this announcement. I'll put it up. Trish, you got that video from Dr. John.
We have got to check our...
Where she actually tracked one of her stalkers down, this woman. And then I had another TI contact.
The horrible thing about that was he was kind of covering his face and saying... you haven't seen anything yet. You better watch out.
An idle threat, but she got it on YouTube and it went viral. And that's what I mean by punching. She punched them and that guy in the nose. And I don't think that guy will be back because she's going to fight back. So they're going to want to go to victims and TIs, targeted individuals, TIs, who will take it. Again and again. Because, part of this has to do with raping.
Just as does the bully go back to the kid on the playground that takes it again and again, right?
Yeah, he'll take it again and again until one day, Dad taught him how to box, right? And that's what, and now it's with the girls, too. We got to teach our girls how to box, right?
Taekwondo or something.
Yeah, something. So you just go, and on that level, the only thing that will do is a punch in the nose. Sure, they might get suspended. They might have to go sit in the principal's office. But you know what? After that, they're not going to be bothered anymore. So and it's the thing people don't want to do, But if you don't do it, you're always going to have these voices behind you and people behind you thinking that, that out of all the people you're weak, and then they're going to keep coming, so that's why,
Hey, can I change the subject?
Please.
I think that's really cool the way you put up all the albums on the side of your page at Podbean there.
You can any of those albums that I have there from the Metaverse days, when I put out a lot, but several. What you can do is you click on any album of what do I have? 6 album releases, okay? You tap on any album and you can actually go to iTunes and download each one of these goes to iTunes. Tap it on, you go to iTunes, you may find 1 or 2 tracks out of 12 that you really like. Well, some of those are you'll find, you listen to it today and they sound like I just made it today, You'll find there are tracks there. For example, how many people would like to download Illusional Satanica? Now,
that was a good one. Hey, I just forgot. I had to make an important call. I'll be right back.
Okay.
The show is almost up this hour.
All right. Trish is out of here, and so we're just wrapping the show. I suppose a lot of you are just, riveted to this subject. And what you have to understand is that it's getting worse as time goes on. There's more cyber stalking as time goes on. There's more gang stalking as time goes on. There is also satellite surveillance and mind control experiments being done on vast sums of the population over vast areas. We're going to find out next hour from Dr. Robert Duncan and or Dr. John Hall exactly what is the statistics that the first thing I want to get into with them though is the assassination. In other words, creating the mind control assassin remotely. And Dr. Robert Duncan is a show. I just decided to have a panel, so I have these 2 sort of heavyweights in the mind control PSYCHOTRONIC. These are the 2 probably most active people that you can have. Each one of them is a 2-hour show. I'm putting them both on one show. And how we wrangled that together at the last minute was totally miraculous.
Yeah, that's good. That's going to be very cool.
All right,
hey,
Frankie, we're done.
Thanks to WWCR for reconnecting our stream. The problem was, on our end.
Sorry, man, I'm sorry. I had a bad website up that was doing.
Oh, hey, yeah, no biggie, man.
But it was doing bad things. All right, we'll see you next hour. I got to get these guys on the horn, Frankie. All right, we'll talk to you later, and stay tuned, everybody. And we'll be right back in the next hour. We just have scratched the surface in the last hour of the amazing and horrific world of stalking. And it's gotten into like a grand level of stalking. Welcome back. This is Zeph Daniel. And I guess I need to get right into it. And the first thing I need to do is talk about Dr. Hall. John Hall has been our guest. He's the author of A New Breed. He is an anesthesiologist in Texas. He's fairly esteemed in the medical profession. He went through an extraordinary experience, which he documents in A New Breed. I have a link to that on the site. And it just gives a personal experience. And really what he's doing in this book is what we all need to be doing. Anyone who is stalked or targeted in any way needs to be documenting all of these things. So he documented it in a book. And I have something to say about that when we get them on. And then Dr. Robert Duncan holds degrees from Harvard and Dartmouth and many other universities. His expertise is directed energy, neurological weapons, psychological information warfare. His movie is called The Enemy Within, Psychic Warfare. And I haven't seen this book, but he has another book called Hacking the Human Mind, I believe. He is able to discuss directed energy, neurological weapons. He's done work in the medical profession, the medical field, and actually really use of electronics in a positive way in keeping doctors out of harm's way so they can treat people that are wounded in the field. But I mean, just a really fascinating. He knows all about MK Ultra, when it began, the whole history of this. I guess he's kind of the go-to guy when you want to understand the electronic warfare aspect of all this. Now, let me see who I've got on the air. If all goes well, I'll have both of our guests here, Dr. John Hall and Dr. Robert Duncan. Are you there, both of you? Hello.
Yes, Dr. Robert Duncan's here.
Yeah. Hey, Zeph. How's it going?
Oh, Dr. John. Okay, Dr. John Hall, Dr. Robert Duncan. Okay, these are the two heavyweights in this the most horrifying topic of all time. You know, electronic harassment, mind control. And to start off with, a lot of people have heard you. I've heard your interview with Alex Ansary on, Coast to Coast on. I'll just start with you, Dr. Robert Duncan. A lot of people know where all this came from, Operation Paperclip, the Nazis, the kind of technological background. But so much is going on today, and I've heard a lot of your stuff from a couple of years ago, but now that we've had the Jared Lee Loughner case, and I just want to ask you about this just right off the bat. I mean, is that potentially a programmed guy?
Oh, absolutely. It's surprising that he even mentioned mind control in his blurb on YouTube, but he very much fits the profile of a programmed assassin. And he was easily discredited in the news, as we saw, as someone who was crazy. And that will sort of explain away what he did. And the motives behind it, his individual motives are going to be different from his controllers' or handlers' motives. And we can only surmise that maybe they want to take away more power, gun rights from the citizens. Well, what do you have? You have more crazy people using guns to commit horrific crimes. You don't know what the political agenda might be, but he's certainly somebody who should be looked at closely as being programmed. He talks about neuro-linguistic programming, which is a form of brainwashing, and programming an assassin. And in the old days, Dr. Ewan Cameron, when he was conducting the experiments for the CIA, he used two-track loops of really negative messaging while the patient was undergoing electroshock and sleep therapy and being given high doses of drugs. And he would try to program a person through this what's called neuro-linguistic programming. The Army uses it as well, and it's a field of study. You can study at MIT, and it's how to control the mind through repetitive statements.
That it's absolutely horrifying to have seen that, but I mean, we all knew that. This guy, if you follow his history, he hadn't been really violent. He'd been weird. He'd been an oddball. He'd been definitely someone you could target as somebody weak or, that would be able to do killing for somebody, or it could be just, we don't know the motives. But, I mean, obviously, of all the people in a population, he would stick out as somebody to mess with if you were in the business of controlling people.
Absolutely. And that's one commonality that you can find. We did about 650 interviews of targeted people, and one commonality is that they're usually easily discredited in public, and they stick out as an oddball of some sort. And so, yeah, he would be an easy target for them.
And then you got to wonder the motive, and, the federal judge is shot. But then, other people can be targeted who are not an oddball. Dr. John Hall, enter, please. And here you are. You were targeted, and and there's nothing that I don't think anything about you that would just signal a flag. Oh, come get this guy. He's easy, or he's manipulatable. Let's try it on him.
Well, not until I joined this fight, anyway. Once you start making noise about this technology and joining and combating this, then certainly, to some extent, you're looked at as an oddball for believing it, for one.
Right.
And especially in medical circles, as a physician, the take in the medical community right now is that you shouldn't be counseling these people as to being victims, but should be referring them to a psychiatrist for a diagnosis. And that's pretty much the pervasive thinking throughout most of the medical community. There's slowly more physicians coming around to see that there's a problem, and it's not necessarily mental illness now. But I do agree with Dr. Duncan in that most of the people that you see being victimized by this are already social outliers. They're already people that are maybe somewhat involved in the drug counterculture or have other factors in their lives that discredit them already before they ever mention a word about electronic harassment.
Okay, but the case in point is your book, A New Breed. Now, I interviewed you right when it came out, pretty much. And at that time, there were just a few reviews on it. But you could tell, like, there were people that were really relieved that you wrote the book, okay, for one. I, for one, was in that category. But then there's others there that would just give you, like, 1 star and call you and, basically try to defame you. Defamation, very big with these people. Defame you right on that Amazon site. And now I notice that because you hung in there, it's gone the other way, where you have a lot of really positive comments now. The public seems to be accepting your book.
Well, in my situation, it was actually my fiancée who was really more the victim.
Okay.
And we did identify the perpetrators in her case, and a lot of those first reviews were actually traced back to some of the perpetrators themselves. That definitely wanted the book discredited and wanted me discredited, and went to some great lengths to try to accomplish that, and luckily did not. But, and the one good thing about Robert Duncan coming out with his book, Soul Catcher Volume 2, my book, I go over we're pretty much of the same mind on how the technology works. My book was more just a story from a credible person that, yes, this is going on. His book goes into detail on how it's done, and has really been a godsend for the victim community.
I'm kind of playing catch-up here with everything. I need to get that book ASAP. Dr. Duncan, did you get harassed for writing that book?
No, I actually haven't. It's been very positive feedback.
Get that book.
It almost seems like more public a person is, more they will, stand back because they don't want it to be too obvious. But I haven't had any problems with the publication. And in your introduction, you said it was called Hacking the Human Mind. The title actually changed.
Okay.
It's called Project Soul Catcher, Secrets of Cyber and Cybernetic Warfare Revealed. And the reason that I called it cybernetics, and the field in psychophysics or neuropsychology in cybernetics comes from a Greek word meaning the art of steering. Cybernetics is about having a goal and taking action to achieve that goal. Knowing whether you have reached the goal requires feedback, a concept that comes from cybernetics. And that evolved into the Latin word for governor. And cybernetics as a process operating in nature has been around for a long time, but in society, we've heard it used first by Plato to refer to government. In modern times, the term cybernetics, there was a book written by Mr. Wiener called The Cybernetics in 1948, a year after the formation of the CIA. Mm-hmm. His subtitle is important because it connects control systems with communication. And and he also points out in 1948 that both artificial systems and biological systems can have purpose, and this was a scary concept back then. So that's the idea behind cybernetics. Cyber has to do with cyber warfare techniques, hacking computers. Now, there's a kernel, and you can still find this paper in the military literature of the Air Force that the mind has no firewall. And so the idea is that hacking into computer systems and hacking into human beings, individual minds or society's minds, the collective conscious, use the same techniques and trickery. So the book tries to cover all of those and get into details of some of the systems that are currently out there.
The first stalker that where I became aware of the stalking was through the Scientologists. They seem to be experts at that, and they're really into this whole cybernetics thing and the mind and manipulation of the mind as well.
They are, and it's. I tried to investigate them a little more thoroughly and did a sort of a comparative religion analysis of my own. But for some reason, in all the literature, the word CIA and Scientology seem to be used together, and so I don't.
Yeah. Okay, I got you.
Well,
I'm just aware of
infiltrated.
What I mean by that is that the whole gaslighting techniques, that were like Stasi techniques, have been employed by the Scientologists, and I'll share an incident later. We have a question coming from the chat room. Is this type of programming or mind control? In this type of programming or mind control, can they overcome inhibitions in people, or is there some type of pre-programming or pre-screening required for it to work? I'm not sure I understand the question. You mean?
Yeah.
You mean can they use this so you overcome your inhibitions against your will? I think that would be a better question.
Okay, and that's the general question of hypnosis. Now, this is one of the CIA's most famous programs. That was leaked during the Frank Church investigations in Congress was a remote hypnotic intracerebral control. So it's a weapon of detrimental hypnosis. And if you talk to some experts, they say under hypnosis, you cannot be forced to do anything that's against your very primitive programming, your morality, your ethics, but obviously they've gone past that. The whole point of some of the CIA programs were to create split personality assassins so that they can commit a crime or finish their mission and then be able to pass a polygraph, but they didn't do it. Yes, they can make you can change your inhibitions, and that's the whole point of most of these mind control studies, to make the person do things that were normally against their principles.
Yeah, and it's... Go ahead, Jim.
Maybe you know that, but on another point, though, it does seem like we're seeing more individuals that there may, at least it seems to me, that there is a subset of the population that does seem to be a little more resistant to the control mechanisms than others. And my personal opinion is that maybe that is some of the group that's being avidly harassed because maybe they don't respond to the control mechanisms as well as most.
Exactly. I think that's an excellent point.
So they would be targeted more, you're saying?
If they know they can do it to 80% of the population, that's not of their interest. They want to focus on that 20%, what makes them resistant. And that can be both used in analysis of, in terms of warfare, how you make the culture resistant to these techniques in case we get in a war between Russia and China using just psychotronics. Or it can be that they want to improve the weapon's effectiveness, which is the majority, in my opinion, of the cases. And what better targets than those that may show resistance to mind control techniques.
Okay, so those of you who are strong, especially if you have strong faith, I think you see people with strong faith and they're able to discern, and this is another big question, the voice of God from the fake voice of God or the beamed-in voice of God.
Yeah, and that's the problem, that on the one hand, faith does provide a solid foundation for a person not to stray from, but these new voice of God weapons, that you can imagine how useful and war that would be. You know, all it commands you to lay down your arms, and you hear this inside your head.
Right.
And of course, it's the way God would talk to you. And so, in a way, faith is a double-edged sword. It can make people believe they're talking to an angel, demon, a god, using these weapons, or it can also ground them more to make sure that they're not tricked into doing the devil's work, so to speak.
I got to warn them every day out there, because we are, as much a spiritual broadcast as anything. But today we really want to get into this. We really want to bring people up to date as to what they can do, so they can then prepare themselves. I've been on all kinds of sites lately where I've seen things like tinfoil blankets and tinfoil hats. Believe it or not, and I know maybe it'll help, but I think in a way. Gosh, I see a lot of people going to great lengths, almost insane lengths, to keep this stuff out of their rooms, out of their apartments, out of their houses. It can drive a person to doing things that make him look mentally unstable.
And that's the problem, Zeph. A tinfoil hat, the only thing it's going to help you get is a psychiatric diagnosis.
Exactly. And there are other sites that say, look, if you've got this problem, if you're being electronically harassed or, gang stalked on any level, whether from, other human beings to electronic, it all kind of goes together. Because I have been a victim of this myself, and I've been public about it. But there's two schools of thought. One, you be public about it, and that's a good way to get yourself tossed in the loony bin. Of course, I've already been tossed in there, so it's like that was when I first when I first became aware of organized stalking, I was like 17 years old. Okay, and it was happening then in a more concrete way. I'd say more the gaslighting type way. Okay, and two times. One time I wound up in an overdose in the hospital where I was given LSD and phenobarbital after I was flipping out from the LSD, and then phenobarbital, and then wound up in a coma. My heart actually stopped. I came back, but it was, and who was doing it? These were people at in the school that I was going to, and some kids that were there as students, and one particular teacher. This had to do with, it's a long story. I can't go into it now. Another time for that testimony. I don't want to take away from this show. The point is it happened to me, and I guess I was targeted for death. I was targeted to be in the mental hospital and then death. You know what I'm saying? I had both, I'm suicidal. I was listed as a suicide. And then actually in the city where I, grew up in L.A., I went back years and years later. I had a long history of having to be dealt with by shrinks and all kinds of, I was a complete mess. But anyway, when I got back there and I ran into, say, an old friend, they said, "You're supposed to be dead. I thought you were dead. We all knew you died then." So after that, the rumor went around that I had died. I didn't make it out of that hospital. Okay, that's pretty.
I get a lot of emails from victims who are correspondents that think they're being targeted with the purposes of death. And yes, some TIs do commit suicide to get away from their torture. But all in all, and we'll get Dr. Duncan's take on this, I really don't think that anyone is being specifically targeted with the expectation of them being killed. And mainly because this is experimentation, and dead guinea pigs aren't good to experiment on.
In my case, I don't think it was back then. It was, it's really interesting. The other thing is that I knew all about, a Dr. West, because I had to do back then. You know what I mean? He was kind of part of this whole plot. But anyway, that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago. He was the head of the neuropsychiatric, or NPI, at UCLA at the time.
That's right, Jolie West. He was very much involved in all of this.
Yeah, and one of, so it's another story. I wanted to throw it out there to get your take on it. It's a horrible thing. I want to ask you one other thing for either one of you. There was a time in 2004, I believe, I was getting voice to skull, and I know who was doing it. It was someone doing it in a nearby house, and it was the Navy fight song. the guy worked for naval intelligence, or was just retired supposedly from naval intelligence. Do you find that to be of any significance?
Here's my take on that. Almost everybody that I've interviewed has voiced the skull believes that it's coming from their neighbors.
Okay.
And so just using some street smarts, I would say that that's a trick. They want you to believe that it's a localized system. But while you were getting it, I bet you could jump on an airplane and fly randomly to another location, and you'd still be getting the voice of the skull. So I think the neighbor is just a point of trickery, and that it's not a localized weapon like that.
It's just a guess. I mean, I guessed, that was my guess. It wasn't that, and I'll tell you this, I couldn't get away from it, and it went on for about, a couple of weeks, maybe a little longer, and then it went away. And I haven't had it since, but I'm just saying that was pretty bad because, like I say, it was pretty loud. You know what I mean? It wasn't like, it was very annoying. Put it that way, and distracting. And if this went on day after day, it would drive you completely nuts.
Oh yeah,
I've heard from multiple victims in New Mexico that are hearing music and hearing the Navy fight song specifically. So I think that is part of an operation that's being done there.
Wow.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. John, for that, because I carried that since 2004, and I didn't know what to, I didn't understand it.
There is a weapon system that's Sierra Nevada Corporation is coming out with, and probably already has, that's called Medusa, and it's for crowd control, and it uses the microwave hearing effect at near ranges. And basically, you can't plug your ears, you can't stop it. The sound is being transmitted directly to the inner ear through small heating vibrations of the brain. And this was written up probably about 4 years ago that they were developing such a weapon. And there is one colonel that says, if you can transmit voices into the enemy's head, I will find a way to talk them to their death. So you can imagine what a useful weapon system that would be.
Okay. Now, how do they... We understand, part of it is to choose stronger victims, but when they want to experiment on this stuff, how do they choose their targets?
Go ahead, Dr. Hall.
Well, I'll give you my opinion on it, and I think it's pretty much random. If you look back historically at the way this research started, most of it was done through front companies or masked as legitimate research through universities. But at least having identified some of the perpetrator groups, with our research, what it appears to me is that the technology is being released to certain, if you want to call them criminal groups or people that are being allowed to have the technology with basically a carte blanche, open-ended invitation to victimize whoever they want to victimize for whatever reason. And I think that's how the powers that be that are actually taking down the data on how well it works are achieving their randomness to their experimentation. I think the individual groups that are being allowed to possess it are being told, victimize whoever you want to victimize. Because if you look across the board, it's certainly random. There's not, it's not one particular racial group. It's not one particular political group. Most of it are common people, housewives. It's not just whistleblowers and political activists. It's, most of the victims are just everyday middle-class people.
Okay. I have another question here. Can they also hear your thoughts while they are implanting their programming or while they're beaming you with something? Do they get feedback?
Absolutely. That's part of the technology that makes it so unbelievable. During hive mining, it's called. The very thought processes are bidirectional, and so you have to create a feedback loop in order for this technology to work. So the answer is a solid yes. Okay,
they can read my thoughts then to a certain extent. During that process of beaming me, they're going to get back some kind of data from me, and it would be involuntary on my part.
That's right. That's right. In fact, You can even probe someone's dreams to get a more subconscious profile of their psychology.
Okay, that is truly horrific. Okay.
Well, you can understand why this is so top secret. The very concept of free will is destroyed. We've been debating this for thousands of years, and to have that argument finalized, well, all of Western philosophy, and from crime and punishment to religion, relies on this concept of free will. They can't just announce it and then say, oh, by the way, we've been running torture experiments on people all around the world. So they're going to be sure to keep this classified for as long as we can.
All right, let's look at the news. Egypt, could they intensify the riots with that gear that they have?
Absolutely, and in fact, it's a major war strategy is to try to get other countries to fight each other. And so you want to intensify the fighting to wage war of attrition. And then, of course, you could use a political maneuver, say that we're going to send in troops to occupy them to help stop the fighting. There are a whole bunch of reasons you'd want to do that. In 1970s, there was an Army intelligence officer that came forward and said the Russians were beaming us with a psychotronic signal all over, and we started sending the same one back to them. But the signal was meant to subdue the population, keep them from becoming violent, and calm them down, as if we were the aggressors. So it can be used in either form, to calm a country's population down, or to incite violence as well. Another colonel said that with this particular radio frequency, he could instill white-hot anger in the subject. Well, that would be proof that they already have that technology, and have been, and of course would be using it in a warfare arena.
Yeah, and everywhere else. Could they do something like I read a term, mental rape? And the idea of one of these crimes would be in that kind of environment, used with a satellite for audio and visual. Could scientists, writers, military people, et cetera, have their intellectual property, like their plans or their theories or whatever, their papers, be stolen?
Oh, yeah.
And that's another problem with this technology. In the last chapter of my book, I go through a lot of the current laws and how they have to be rewritten, because the very idea of intellectual property is now defunct. If you can steal someone's property, although I think they were probably, in the term of mental rape, thinking of more severe actions. I mean, literally, there is one simulated rape from an interview of a woman that I did, and so you can cause the same mental harm, trauma to the psyche in a simulated fashion as you can in a physical fashion.
Okay, folks out there.
And we are seeing that, Zeph. I have heard from a lot of victims, female victims, that do get what they call a simulated rape, or, basically, their genitals made to tingle or hurt while they're being hit with, sexual assault images at the same time. That's a pretty common complaint among female victims.
Yeah, we used to be called, incubus, succubus type of demonic activity. Now it's become electronic. In other words, this all that sort of the stuff we would call spiritual warfare has really gone high tech. And it's really, it really is horrifying. But this idea of mental rape is on the rise. Does that mean then that there are necessarily military ops behind the scenes? Could there be rapists in charge of this technology, or having access to it? Then, just like common criminals, can they operate these satellites?
You have to define criminal. I think many segments of our government operates as criminals and above the law. No, under the George Bush administration, John Yoo wrote up his torture memos, and it included rape and other things in there that as long as we as a country do it without taking pleasure in it, then it's not considered part of torture. So my guess is that they're getting around the law that way. And no, I don't think the common, criminal has access to this. I think they're quite trained.
Okay, because see, there's a little debate on that because there's been some information out there that the criminal groups have been able to access somehow through their computers by getting hacked codes or whatever these satellites and using them for their own nefarious activities. But you're saying that's probably unlikely.
It's unlikely. The CIA has hired the mafia in the past to try to kill Castro. They're very much utilize each other's networks. But I don't see what the common criminal has to gain by wasting their time torturing, random people, basically. John, what's your take on it?
Well, my take on it is kind of like what you said. I mean, it depends on how you define criminal. And one of the things that worries me in society right now is we're at a point now where we have more people in the private sector with top secret clearances. That most of our intelligence services are being farmed out now, being contracted out to private companies. These are people that got their training in one government agency or another, still maintaining their clearance, but working for private intelligence gathering companies. One of them is based here out of San Antonio called Mantech. And it's well known that they did purchase Igor Smirnov's technology through a third-party company, and they're based right here. So I mean, it's a real fine line between what you call legitimate experimentation or experimentation by the government and criminals accessing it, because these people are still criminals, but they're criminals that have a top-secret clearance. So that end of it, I can see where you could say yes, it has gotten into criminal hands, but these are criminals that were government trained and still have clearances.
Yeah, a guy like Adolf Hitler today, where he used to hire Tibetan remote viewers to go in and try to get information on the enemy or invade and try to kill them remotely. Just think how much fun he'd be having with all this if he were around today. I mean, it's just my feeling is we're at the beginning, not toward the end. What do you think? To me, it seems like this is just gearing up more and more. I mean, I started dealing with this subject, the technology of it, a few years ago, and over all of those years, every year thereafter, it increased. And are we still increasing? And how do you see the future of psychotronic?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a technology that's not going away. Look, one of the whole points of writing the book that I did, and I have another one coming out that gets into the physics and details of the sciences of mind control and cybernetics. This is a technology that's going to be more disruptive to the human race and culture than the internet, airplanes, or cars combined. It's not going away. It's actually a species changer. So it's unfortunately, this is our future, and the whole point is to get it out of the wrong hands. Right now, we always use technology for warfare and spying and advantage first. Then the technology can be used for good, and there are many medical purposes for the technology. Technology is neutral, and it's just right now it's being used in such an evil way that we are really afraid of the technology. But there can always be controls over it, like nuclear weapons. It can be regulated. But it's not going away.
Every year it's increased, but now every year I have more and more, I'm in contact with more and more TIs, targeted individuals. And just after John, after we did our last interview, I met some more that were coming forth, and then I became aware that there are networks out there of TIs, of survivors, and like you said, from every walk of life, basically old, young. Age doesn't seem to matter either. Okay, if someone finds out or thinks that they're a targeted individual, what should they do? What's the first step?
Well, they should contact one of the organizations out there, Freedom from Covert Harassment and Surveillance, join some support groups, get some information before they act. because they're going to go down the same pathway of trickery that almost every TI goes through. They go to their local police. Well, the police, they don't know anything about it. They're not going to do anything. They'll go to the FBI. They'll get the same response. And so they need to know what works and what doesn't so they don't fall for the common traps. That's my advice.
Okay, John.
I would give the same advice, Zeph, because one thing, Dr. Duncan and I both have spoke to multiple victims, and there's a certain set of programs that they use with each individual, and each individual goes down the same destructive, self-destructive pathways when they're exposed to these. And one of the first is that it's coming from the neighbors. So you do something crazy to your neighbors and get arrested and diagnosed, and then once you're further victimized by the psychiatric community, then you're really heading downhill. And then the second one is that there's got to be a chip in me, and I get emails from people every day that the only way this could be happening to me is if I'm chipped. That's actually another falsehood. Are we finding chips in people? Sure we are. Is it a necessity? Absolutely not.
Okay, so that brings new light to the whole abduction phenomenon because, it seems to me these two things are related. What are your thoughts on that? We'll start with you, Dr. Duncan. What do you think?
There's no doubt that the government started using cover stories, alien cover stories. Many years ago, they found them to be effective. And so these abductions that have been reported even early in the 60s are most definitely related to this government experimentation program. And they've found a way to automate it and literally ramp it up. And I think that's one reason why we're seeing more TIs. It could be also that more TIs have access to the internet, and that's helping people get together and share notes. But it does look like it's being ramped up.
Yeah, and to me it looks like it's going more toward a societal or a large span of people, crowd control, the thought control of a nation type of thing. I mean, that's right. It's not going to just be, controlling this one and that one individually. It almost seems like it's got to go nationwide or even worldwide.
This is more effective than normal propaganda. You can affect people while they're sleeping and working. They don't even need to shut off their televisions to get programming. So every country in the world, of course, their goal is to shepherd their people into one conformed thinking pattern. You can look at maybe terrorism as being a milestone to get people to maybe give up the rights, freedom of thought. We got to read everyone's brain print just to make sure they're not a terrorist. So, I think it's definitely heading that direction.
Yeah. Once it gets out of the the sort of beta testing stage, it's going mainstream. It's the pre-crime, that whole Steven Spielberg movie. What was that called, Trish? It wasn't called pre-crime.
Minority Report.
Minority Report. Okay. To me, and then they were using psychics. Well, just replace those psychics with high technology.
Mm-hmm.
And
exactly.
And then that's the same movie, and I think some of these movies are kind of prophetic in a way as to, just making predictions of where, especially science fiction. And it looks like this is one pathway they're following. But in the end of that movie, we might recall that, the technology was deemed evil. Ultimately, it didn't help society. And when they destroyed that whole place and they destroyed the Department of Pre-Crime, that was the solution. In other words, the good guys won then. But that, as you say, that's not going to be the solution here because this technology is not going to go away like in that movie. It's going to increase.
There's no way this is going away. The investments, once you understand the how large of a sample set, how much human suffering they've allowed to put into this, developing it, the number of dollars, there's no way they're going to give this up. And this is here to stay. And the people in control that are I'm sure, so seduced by its power that they rather see the human race go away before this does.
Well, as the big new Brzezinski said, it's easier to kill 1 million people than control them. I guess when he said that, he wasn't taking all this into account.
And you know what? And there is good. This technology is not entirely bad. I mean, looking at things from a medical point of view,
right?
You know, the ability to maybe help with addiction, you know, help with some medical problems with it. Look at the Terry Schiavo case. You know, to determine whether that woman had conscious thought or not. You know, the doctors were having to look at EEG readings that, you know, that harken back to the 1950s. You know, a bunch of intelligible squiggly lines on paper that really are just about unreadable. They could have put this system on her and knew if she had conscious thought within minutes. I mean, so there is some good things that can come out of this technology. Just as Dr. Duncan said, it's not being used in that manner.
Okay. Right. I understand there's a positive aspect, but I think in a way we have to go through like a trial by fire as a culture. In other words, we're going to go through this ugly time first. And where we come out on the end of this ugly time, you know, it's anyone's guess. But those of you who are TIs, again, you know who you are. I guess, could I say this? If you think you are, you might be. And what are the statistics on that? For people who think they are, how many of them turn out to actually be targeted individuals?
I'm sure it's a gray scale. When you say targeted, it's often black and white. I'm sure they're in the experimentation. There are people we found that just get B2K, and the B2K is only positive, although that's a rare case. Usually it's always negative messaging. Some people get tortured. Some people get both. And it runs the gamut. So you can imagine if you're trying to test a new drug, you want a random sample and you want to pull out all the different variables, and it's called discriminant function analysis. And so you want to test it on different people in different types of variations of the hypnosis, of the mind control, of the stalking, and to see what is most effective.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, people that have, if you don't think those thoughts are your thoughts, and you keep getting these negative thought patterns, or even, like you say, positive thought patterns. So, I had a vision from God. I have all this going on, or I have a new pathway. I suddenly, or I want to commit suicide or something. I mean, do you go to the suicide group, and then you realize it's not your thought, but you feel like you're being beamed? Do you go to the suicide support group, or do you go to the TI support group? I mean, if you go to the suicide support group and you say, I'm getting all these thoughts beamed into my head, they're going to think you're a schizophrenic right off the bat.
Oh, yeah. You'll be labeled immediately. Yeah, and that's a given. And then you'll be given drugs that may or may not help. So that's a difficult question. The victims that I've studied, they almost all got the full-on testing, so there was no doubt that they were TIs. So people that may just be getting brought into the program, well, maybe if they know too much, the program won't be effective, and they'll give up on them. So these radio shows and books are very important, at least in my mind, to spoil and ruin a lot of their data that they're gathering.
Okay. Well, this is, unfortunately for some of you, this may be a painful topic, but, you need to get the information. There is help out there. These are, groups, and I suppose they have to be self-policing because there could be infiltrators into those groups, those support groups for being a TI. If you feel they are on the internet, you can get information. I've got a couple of resources here, and let me see what you guys think about this. It's freedomfchs.com. Freedom from
covert harassment and surveillance.
Okay, that would be a good one. Raven1.net. I guess she was Eleanor White was really the first one I ever read that had even dealt with this subject. And, mindjustice.org is another one. Americans, Thought Control, Mind Control, Disinformation, and Other Naughty Things by Moss David Posner. I guess that's some sort of report. Microwave Harassment and Mind Control Experimentation, and Federation Against Mind Control Europe. Another one is the study of U.S. intelligence community human rights violations and continuing research in electromagnetic weapons. That's a PDF document. And I want to know, Dr. Duncan, where can we get your books? Amazon?
Amazon.com. Secrets of Cyber and Cybernetic Warfare. The title's Project Soulcatcher.
Okay, I'm going to have those links and the pictures of those books. When we produce the show as a podcast, I will have all of that. You click on the picture, you'll go right to the link. You can go there and get the book. Otherwise, is there any other bookseller? I'm sure would have. If you don't have internet, you can just call up whoever go to your Borders bookstore or go to your Barnes and Noble or one of those, and you can order it there, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, you can get any book anytime. There's no excuse not to get a book. Is there an e-book available?
Right now, no, not for my books. I am thinking of putting it on Kindle, but it's not on there yet.
Okay. Now, do you have a website? I've looked and I found one that was all Chinese. But I can't understand this.
There actually is a Chinese support group called Peace Pink, and they have their electromagnetic groups, experimentation groups there, support groups. There's one in Russia as well. I do not have a website. I don't have time to maintain it. I know Dr. Hall does.
I know, and I've got that on the site. That's satweapons.com, right?
.com. And if anybody has any questions about Dr. Duncan's book, you can email me through that website, and can certainly pass on the information on where to get his book. It is a must-read. To understand this technology, I'm a medical doctor. Compared to him, I'm definitely a fat girl at this prom. So, if you really
now,
want
come
to
on, that's
being
me. Yeah. No. Look, I need both. Okay, I need the new breed. I need a new breed. Satellite Terrorism in America by Dr.John Hall, and I need to also read Dr. Duncan to get the whole, by Dr. Robert Duncan to get the entire, the other side. I need both sides of this: the personal side, the technological side, where these, and also Dr. John Hall, you are involved with targeted individuals, with helping them. Because I know quite a few that they've contacted you and gotten help that way.
Yeah, I work with a lot of people, at least trying to get them to go down some of the same pathways that we've talked about, because invariably they think it's their upstairs neighbor or the neighbor across the street, and it's mainly trying to explain the technology to them so they don't do something to victimize themselves.
In my case, the neighbor moved away. After I prayed that they would move away.
But it didn't stop after that, did it?
No, it didn't stop. But then it did stop, And then I had somebody actually email me and say he was doing it from Australia, but he was lying. I knew that. I got the impression that he was just making, because I'd mentioned it on a broadcast. See what I mean? So someone steps up and go, I was doing that to you, and he apologized for having sent those kind of messages. But then what I realized later was, now this was a definite thing, just like you turn on a light switch, that you turn on your stereo or TV. It was like that. No, but again, it's been many years. I've been left alone. So am I free? Either one. Am I free now that I've been left alone? I haven't had that experience for a few years.
Time will tell.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I've heard of other people that have been released for a time, and then they're brought back into the project. So don't give up the fight just because you may be free.
Well, what I'm trying to do with my situation is I'm trying to bring logic to it. I'm trying to bring a better understanding. Just for this is a personal show for me because I'm trying to understand. Because I know that a lot of the time I've been quiet. and at one point, I was pretty wild on I went out live on the internet in 2002, and that probably saved my life. But I mean, I was pretty out there in terms of explaining stuff that was happening to me. And one guy that was a listener, he was a doctor, and he gave me a clean bill of health and a clean bill of mental health, and then signed it as a legal document because he said you might need this if they try to throw you in the loony bin. So obviously, I made the mistake, but I didn't know what else to do. I was all alone. I didn't know what else to do, so I went forward on the internet. Thinking that that's what I should do, and nothing happened to me. In other words, I survived, obviously, And
that's a fight we're trying to fight right now too, is to educate the psychiatric community that this technology does exist. Because at the very top, American Psychiatric Association, they damn well know that this technology exists. At the community level, the psychiatrist that you're going to be sent to in your hometown probably is largely ignorant of the technology and is just going to fulfill the requirements of the DSM-4 to give you a diagnosis, and that's up to us to change that through education.
Well, when they diagnosed me, I had everything I had all kinds of like paranoia and borderline personality and all kinds of terms, that just explained that I couldn't really function in society because I was getting interrupted, if you will. But anyway, I've also tried to understand how this works together with the demonic and the satanic, because there are people, I think we would all agree, walking around as programmed, it seems, by demons. They're just not the same as who they were. And they're in need of an exorcism. I mean, what say you, either one, about exorcism today and deliverance?
Well, I can't talk to the spiritual level, but there is a weapon system discussed in my book called Satan, and it stands for Silence is Fascination Through Adapting Networks. So you can imagine you have a behavioral modification tool, weapon. You can have dial-in lethality simply by manipulating the humans themselves to hurt themselves. And it uses all the best medical discoveries except in the negative. Fire can be used to keep people warm and heat food, kill bacteria, or it can be used to burn down villages. And so this is an extreme example of weaponization of the medical profession.
Okay. Well, so if anyone feels they're targeted, there are support groups. Do you think these support groups are legit? How do you know that? Okay, here's a good question. How would you know something is wrong with a support group?
There are many things wrong with most of the support groups, and that's just natural dysfunctionality. Okay. People are on edge. People are being tortured. And yes, maybe you'll find an infiltrator who is trying to stir the pot for no reason. But I found that the support groups, they can be helpful. You get information, but you can get sucked into them, and they become infighting. And unfortunately, you're bringing together people of all walks of life under duress. You're going to have a lot of that infighting.
Well, I don't mind that. What I mind is that it becomes another experiment. That
in a way, it is. It's what they study in the intelligence agencies is how to develop relationships. This is published in DARPA as one of their projects with lifelong understanding of the development of relationships, as well as how to disrupt human networks. So you can imagine, that, yes, they probably are part of an experiment.
Well, all right. Look, we're just about out of time. Again, Dr. Robert Duncan, I thank you so much for being here. You don't have a website. The books, I will have those links, Amazon.com, and Dr. John Hall. As always, Dr. John Hall also is a broadcaster and has, you've got a whole venture there, but you can contact him. I'll get more links up on our show so they can follow your shows as well. You've done a lot, Dr. Hall. You've done a lot in terms of, being an activist out there, and and a lot of people really look up to you, and they're just really thankful that you came forward. But you are a leader among men, as it were. You're out there bringing awareness to this. But we're all out of time. I thank you both for being here, and God bless.
Thank you for having me.
And God bless both of you. Okay, and I'm going to be catching up. Thank you so much. I've got to let these guys go, and that's it on our interview. And, well, what do you think? Pretty amazing, huh? Zeph Daniel, and I have no time to explain anything. I just have to get out of here. We love you. We're praying for you, and we'll see you next time, okay? All right? Until we meet again next week, you shortwavers and you people with iTunes, get in there. It's the link is right on our site. ZephDaniel.com will take you there. We are all out of time. And, hey, look, chin up. There's help. These guys are very brave going forward with what they're doing. But today we brought you pretty much the cutting edge of what it is. Okay? It is what it is.